Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and welcome to my Argenti guide and review. By the end of it, you're gonna know how good he is and everything there is to know on how to play and build him. We'll be covering his power level and if you should pull for him, kit and gameplay, best builds, and team synergies. Argenti is a physical erudition character that is a master of AoE battles, who potentially takes the crown as the strongest character in battles that consistently have 4 or more enemies in them. Despite being built for AoE though, Argenti has a decent single target as well, thanks to his ultimate which his entire kit is centered around. Argenti's ultimate actually has the single highest base damage multiplier of any ability in the game, but with the catch of also having the highest energy cost by a significant margin at 180 energy. Because of this defining feature, the entirety of Argenti's kit and team building is focused around his ultimate and trying to access it as quickly and efficiently as possible. But to understand his power more, and if you should pull him, let's cover his main strengths and weaknesses in more detail. First up, his strengths. He of course has the hardest hitting single target ability in the game that is also AoE at the same time, and has 2 ultimates instead of 1 to address his high energy cost problem. He can choose to spend half his usual ultimate energy if it isn't ready yet for a much weaker version of it to deal AoE damage in a pinch. His kit also has a passive that grants him more energy the more enemies he hits, doubling down on his AoE nature. He also gains a lot of free crit rate as well, making getting an excellent crit ratio on him very simple. And finally, most of his best supporting options are 4 stars, which don't need Eidolons to support him effectively. As for weaknesses, Argenti has one of the simplest kits in the game, for better or for worse, with no additional actions, ways to deal damage, or damage over time. All his damage is restricted to his own turn or when using his ultimate. And because of his insanely expensive ultimate, in fights without a lot of enemies to hit or without help from supports to grant him energy, his damage can feel underwhelming at times, especially on single target. And right now, one of his best supports and his sustain of choice is a 5-star limited abundance character, Wah. She really is huge for him as she grants him extra energy. And finally, as a main DPS unit, he faces, of course, some pretty stiff competition now and in the future. To top it off, his erudition, which has very limited strong accessible Lightcone options. So with Argenti's main strengths and weaknesses covered, is he worth it and should you pull for him? Well, Argenti has respectable damage on single target when paired with his ideal team, especially against physical weak enemies, but not enough to match some of the already powerful damage dealers released like Jinglu. His true strength lies in his ability to deal AoE damage, especially in fights with 4 or more enemies present. In situations like this, he is absolutely a unit you'll be glad to have on your account. If you're missing a strong hyper carry or are after an AoE specialist, Argenti is certainly one to consider, and has the added bonus of having a completely stacked banner of 4 stars alongside him on his initial release. With that covered, let's dive into how to push Argenti's kit and gear to the limit. So as mentioned, Argenti's kit is actually one of the simplest and most straightforward kits in the entire game. Using it effectively is still important though, so let's dive into the details. Argenti's ultimate is the focus of his kit, and has 2 different forms that can be accessed, a weaker form that costs 90 energy, and an empowered form that costs 180 energy. To allow you to track this, Argenti has 2 different energy bars, one that fills up as normal, and one that appears as a prismatic ring around the usual energy globe. Filling the normal one completely will grant you access to the 90 cost ultimate, and filling the prismatic ring after that will transform the ultimate into the empowered version, changing its icon from a rosebud into a rose bloom, as you can see here. The 90 energy ultimate deals a modest amount of AoE damage to all units, and is good at clearing out annoying smaller monsters in a fight or for overworld farming, but is overall less efficient when it comes to dealing the most overall damage. The 180 cost ultimate on the other hand does a huge amount of physical damage to all enemies, and then after that deals 6 hits of physical damage randomly to all enemies. The way the ability is set up is incredibly powerful. It first kills all the weak enemies with the initial AoE hit, allowing the second part to focus in on the remaining tankier enemies, avoiding any wasted overkill damage and channeling all 6 of those hits onto only a few targets. When single target is a priority, save your energy for the 180 cost ultimate, but in quick fights with a lot of trash enemies, the 90 cost is incredibly useful for quick clears. Argenti's skill is simply an AoE physical attack that deals physical damage to all enemies. Yes, that's it. Argenti's talent grants him 3 additional energy for every enemy his attacks hit, allowing him to gain access to his ultimate faster the more enemies he is facing. For example, his skill normally generates 30 energy, but against 5 targets, when he hits all 5 of them, it generates 45. The second part of his talent grants him a stacking buff every time he hits an enemy with an attack. Each stack of this buff grants him a 2.5% crit rate up to a cap of 10 stacks, for a total of 25% crit rate at max stacks. You can treat this crit as a permanent and easily accessible stat boost as it accumulates very quickly. Argenti's technique dazes enemies on use, causing them not to attack you in the overworld. This technique is not an entry technique, meaning there's no reason not to use it in difficult fights, and as a result I always recommend activating it. Upon initiating combat with a dazed enemy, Argenti deals physical damage to all enemies and, most importantly, regenerates 15 energy. To round out his kit, Argenti's bonus abilities provide some decent boosts but aren't essential to his gameplay. The first causes him to deal 15% more damage to enemies whose HP percentage is 50% or lower. The second grants him 2 energy each time an enemy enters battle. This can be via a new wave or being spawned by a mechanic. His last ability grants him 1 stack of his talent every time his turn starts, helping him reach 10 stacks more quickly. Level up Argenti's traces in the following order. Level his skill, ultimate and talent all to level 7 to start with. Then, if you want to invest more in him, I recommend leveling his ultimate to level 10. After that, you can level the talent and skill equally if you want to invest even more. Whenever a bonus ability is available, unlock it, and prioritize getting the small attack percent and physical damage percent traces behind them. Now it's time to tie his kit together and execute a rotation that maximizes the amount of enhanced ultimates Argenti gains access to. Reaching exactly 180 energy by himself is quite the challenge, and is specific to how many enemies he is fighting. But to get a better idea of exactly what his rotation looks like, let's dive into how much energy he can generate in pure single target and against 3 enemies. So Argenti's ultimate requires 180 energy, and by spamming his skill, we can gain 150 energy from using 5 skills, gain 5 from a refund from his ultimate, and with just 1 enemy on the field, we'll have performed 6 hits for his talent, netting us an additional 18 energy. Adding all this together, we get a total of 173 energy. And when considering the fact that Argenti is likely to get hit once or twice during his long rotation, and that he gains a bit of energy from his bonus ability, this should cover his 180 energy cost ultimate unassisted. Now when against 3 targets, Argenti's rotation changes and becomes a lot more favorable. Instead of 5 skills, we can use 4 skills for 120 energy, and gain 45 energy from 15 hits of his talent, alongside 5 energy refunded from his ultimate. This totals 170 energy, which is 1 action faster and similar to his single target rotation. The more targets Argenti is against, the more energy he'll generate, and the faster he'll gain his ultimates. To conclude, Argenti is at worst likely to run a 5 action rotation, and against multiple enemies, it's looking more like a 4 action rotation. But both of these scenarios can be substantially improved with the help of energy recharge supports like Hua and Ting Yun. Before we get stuck into relics, let's cover what Argenti's best stats are and why. The stats I recommend are crit rate and crit damage, speed, and to a lesser extent, increased damage and attack percentage. Crit rate and crit damage are Argenti's best damage boosting stats. Shoot for the standard 1% crit rate per 2% crit damage to maximize his potential. But remember, he gains 25% crit rate for free from his talent at trace level 10, so factor that in when choosing how much crit damage to get on him. For attack, Argenti has a limited amount of it in his kit, making it a reasonable stat to chase, but only after a solid crit ratio has been established. Think of it more like a bonus stat that you definitely definitely want, but not at the expense of getting a good crit ratio. Damage percent isn't something Argenti has much of in his kit, but his signature Lightcone and his next best option, Today's Another Peaceful Day, grant a ton of it, making up for this fact. So if you're using either of these Lightcones, the value of damage percent diminishes somewhat, especially compared to crit rate stats, which is worth taking note of when evaluating the value of this stat. And finally, speed, as with most carries, is incredibly important, and hitting an endgame speed breakpoint makes clearing endgame faster and more comfortable, but as usual, stacking speed past your desired breakpoint isn't advised. Aim for any of the speed breakpoints shown here as a baseline, or if you're using a speed support like Hanya or Asta, aim for a breakpoint while factoring their speed buffs in. When tackling endgame, as a guideline, shoot for these unbuffed stats. Go for around 3000 HP and 900 defense, but the more the better. For crit rate, go for 70 to 80% with Argenti's talent fully stacked and active. For crit damage, you want around 140 to 160%, and for speed, I recommend getting 134 or shooting for one of the other breakpoints recommended. For relics and Lightcones, I've done some calculations to give you guys an idea of their difference in power. Feel free to find additional details on Argenti min-maxing linked in the description below though. For Argenti's main set, I recommend any of the following sets: 4-piece Streetwise Boxing, 4-piece Musket, 2-piece Musket combined with 2-piece Streetwise, or 2-piece Haka combined with 2-piece Streetwise. 4-piece Streetwise Boxing is Argenti's best damaging set, granting an immense amount of attack percent and physical damage percent. Getting full value from it requires a bit of time to accumulate stacks though, which is a bit of a downside you'll need to consider. 4-piece Musket is the next best set for Argenti, offering a speed bonus that eliminates the need for any speed substats to hit the powerful speed breakpoint of 134 speed. It also offers attack percent, which is a nice bonus, and is easily accessible. An alternative damage focus set to 4-piece Streetwise is 2-piece Musket and 2-piece Streetwise, which can be a little easier to gear for, but is a slight downgrade. Finally, an alternative to 4-piece Musket that grants the same speed bonus but offers physical damage percent instead of attack percent is 2-piece Haka and 2-piece Streetwise. For planar sets, I recommend Frontline Glamoth, Redolent Arena, Space Ceiling Station, or Inalt Solsoto. The strongest standalone planar set for Argenti when at 135 speed is Frontline Glamoth, and it's even stronger at 160 speed. However, it doesn't have any crit, so can fall behind other options in certain team compositions. Redolent Arena is a strong crit option for AoE based fights, offering a 20% damage increase to Argenti's skill, which in AoE is actually a bigger damage increase than you might expect. The more enemies in the fight, the more powerful this set becomes compared to alternatives. Inalt Solsoto is very close in power to Redolent Arena, despite buffing his most powerful ability, his ultimate. The reason it's close is because in AoE fights, Argenti's skill actually does respectable damage, and the Redolent Arena buff is bigger than Inalt Solsoto's. Finally, Space Ceiling Station is an okay set for Argenti if you have a good set with nice substats already for him. But it doesn't have any crit stats, which when considering a full team with buffs, causes to fall behind somewhat. Overall, comparing all of the planar sets, each of them are close enough that I'd recommend going for the one which has the better rolls, and you've farmed the most. But if you could choose, you'd definitely go for the ones with the crit stats, as it will offer you a better crit ratio. For main stats, use the following. On the body armor, use crit rate or crit damage, depending on which one gives you the better crit ratio. For boots, speed is the safest option, but attack percent can be strong when combining Argenti with supports that offer him speed like Hanya or Asta. For the sphere, physical percent is best in most cases, but attack percent isn't far behind, so an attack percent orb with excellent substats can be used. And for the rope, use attack percentage. For substats, stack as much crit rate and crit damage as possible to achieve the already mentioned ratio of 2% crit damage per 1% crit rate, while also getting enough speed to hit your desired speed breakpoint. After maxing out as many of these stats as possible, search for attack percent as a nice bonus. When choosing Argenti's best Lightcones, we're looking for two things: strong base stats and as many damage multipliers as possible. Here are a selection of his top Lightcones and how they stack up against each other. His signature and instant before gaze is of course his best in slot, offering him an absurd amount of percent damage on his ultimate and a strong amount of crit damage. but it's not as far ahead as alternatives as some other characters' signatures, making it somewhat optional. His next best option with a similar but weaker effect as his signature is Today is Another Peaceful Day, specifically at higher superimposition levels. It has all the upsides of his signature, but trades the crit damage for the damage percent increase affecting not just his ultimate, but his entire kit, substantially improving its utility. Before Dawn, Jin Yuan's signature Lightcone isn't great on Argenti, but isn't bad either. Most of the effect is wasted on him, but it has enough generic damage multipliers and high base stats to be a reasonable choice overall. Genius Repose at high superimposition levels provides a nice attack percent boost and a very strong conditional crit damage increase when slaying enemies. It's a decent option if you don't have access to any of the Lightcones already mentioned. Seriousness of Breakfast isn't the most ideal option for Argenti, but it is the best free-to-play Lightcone we have for him. It has a reasonable amount of damage bonuses once all 3 stacks of the attack boost have been accumulated, allowing it to keep up for the most part. Finally, Night on the Milky Way actually has exceptional potential to be powerful on Argenti, but has an insanely conditional effect with an exceptionally short duration. This makes this Lightcone powerful in the right scenarios, but on average difficult to use in most cases. If a fight arises where you can fight against many enemies at once consistently and break them, this Lightcone may skyrocket in value. Overall, I recommend his signature or a high superimposition level of Today is Another Peaceful Day to maximize Argenti's damage. But neither of those are particularly accessible though, so if you have Jin Yuan's signature or an S5 Seriousness of Breakfast, those are also reasonable options, allowing him to perform suitably in Endgame. Argenti doesn't need his Eidolons to do his job, but if you're interested in investing more into him, I've calculated the rough benefit of each of them in a 3-target fight without the assistance of his team, you can see here. For investment though, if you're looking for a clear breakpoint for Argenti, it would be his E1. It grants him a large power boost unconditionally, adding 4% crit damage to his talent, allowing him to gain up to 40% crit damage total at max stacks, seriously boosting his overall damage output. Argenti is a pure damage character, without any current synergies with other damaging units, meaning he's best played in hypercarry team comps with 2 supports buffing him. Some supports and even sustains are better with him than others and are absolutely key to playing him to his max potential, so let's cover each of those. For sustained synergies, there is absolutely one standout option for Argenti, and that's Hua Hua. Hua Hua is the most synergistic healer with Argenti thanks to her ultimate, granting him a percentage of his total energy. At max rank, Hua Hua generates 20% energy for the entire team, which for Argenti is equal to 36 energy. Hua Hua's main downside is her skill point consumption, but it's easily mitigated by Argenti and his possible team combinations, as he himself doesn't use many skill points and he can also be run alongside Hanya for even more skill points, creating an incredibly powerful combo. For harmony synergies, Bronya is of course one of the strongest, but she doesn't have any specific synergies with Argenti. But as usual, speed tuning Bronya 1 speed slower than him will allow her to double his actions, granting him more damage, faster energy, all on top of huge buffs. Next is Hanya, who has excellent synergy with Argenti. Due to his AoE nature, he will always activate Hanya's Burden, regardless of which enemy it is on at the time. He is also physical, the same element as Hanya, allowing for additional Lightcone, Break, and Relic synergies. Hanya's ultimate is also a great boost for Argenti, giving him attack percent, but most importantly some bonus speed, allowing him to hit higher speed breakpoints, all while complementing his other best supports with additional skill point generation. Last for harmony is Ting Yun. She is absolutely one of, if not Argenti's best support, granting him massive damage but also energy recharge with absurd synergy with his preferred sustain, Hua Hua. Combining Ting Yun and Hua Hua, Argenti can access his ultimate absurdly quickly, boosting his combat potential and damage substantially. For debuffing synergies, Pella and Silver Wolf both provide Argenti an alternative way of scaling his damage through Defense Shred, and in Silver Wolf's case, Resistance Shred as well. Pella is preferred for Argenti when looking to specialize in AoE fights, where Silver Wolf is the more powerful option for single target, where you need Argenti to take out a single target quickly. Right now, based on my experience, testing, and discussion among the community, the strongest and smoothest team for Argenti looks to consist of Argenti, Ting Yun, Hanya, and Hua Hua. This team focuses on granting Argenti as much energy and damage as possible to access his incredibly powerful ultimate quickly. Huahua's percent energy recharge is incredible for Argenti, but she requires skill points to gain fast access to it. In order to assist with this, Hanya streamlines the team with her incredibly skill point positive rotation, while also bringing great damage boosts. To finish the team, of course, Tinyun, the Queen of Energy supports, is the final support. She provides Argenti great damage boosts, but also a massive amount of energy, and combining her with Huahua only allows her to gain her ultimate even faster, fueling Argenti even more. It's possible with further testing, a stronger team composition might appear, but that's all I have for Argenti for now. Hopefully you guys learned something new and enjoyed my guide, and until next time, cheers.